Euan, can you tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, where you're from?
Great. From London, very uninterestingly, but I am Euan Blair, founder and CEO of Multiverse, and we deliver consequential learning in tech, data, and AI. And we do that by diagnosing the gaps between a company's goals and the capability of their people, prescribing learning pathways to actually go and address those gaps, and then delivering the treatment with human coaches and AI to ensure that everyone is able to apply their learning successfully to delivering outcomes in their business.
Okay, now clearly generative AI is evolving at pace, it's complex and it's continuously changing. Can you talk a bit about the state of the nation in terms of where most large organisations are with their investments in people and skills to support the adoption and optimisation of AI?
Yeah, so look, I think the first thing to say is every organisation is suffering from what I would call AI anxiety. Right? Either that others are doing really sexy, exciting things that they aren't yet doing and haven't adapted to, or that they are failing to actually capture good use cases because they haven't got their ducks aligned around the ethics or the use cases or the applicability of AI. And what that's meant is there is a lot of swirl, and companies are still struggling to find really just clear examples of delivering outcomes with AI. And I think that's where training comes in, because companies have spent billions on software and they're spending a huge amount on AI related or enabled software. But if they don't spend a similar amount on training, you'll never realize the productivity gains from that software. And you see this with AI, right? At the moment, it is often being used as a toy by early adopters and advocates who know what they're doing. But if you want to embed it in the workforce and actually have it drive business outcomes, you need formal structured training programs to unlock its capability.
Talk a bit about how the skills gap around AI compares with other emerging technologies like quantum and cyber, Internet of Things.
Well, look, take quantum as an example. I think the difference is quantum, you'll have deep specialists in that area. And there is absolutely a skills gap, and it's something people need to be trained on, but it won't be ubiquitous throughout the workforce. The fascinating thing about AI is every employee is going to need to have a level of AI literacy, a bit like with data, right? Anyone who wants to be successful now has to be at least conversant in how to use data and has to have a basic level of data skills. But the workforce has a massive gap here. I mean, half of the workforce has had no formal training over the last 5 years. So I think the big task with AI is to train people at scale, right? This cannot be a niche pursuit for people who are technology evangelists. It has to be embedded in the DNA of an organization.
Yes, and when the internet emerged, and there have been some comparisons between the internet and AI in terms of adoption, but when that went mainstream back in the 90s, there was no training as such, and perhaps that was a missed opportunity. Now with Gen AI in particular, how on earth do we scale the training so that a whole workforce across, from everyone from Gen Alpha to to boomers can be trained up, and we can really make the most of those investments in those skills and training?
Well, this is one of the reasons I founded Multiverse, because we've made this mistake before. Every big tech inflection point has seen a huge amount of value accrue to a small number of tech companies, but it's taken quite a long time for the gains to be realized by the broader economy and by society, because training has often been an afterthought. And a big obsession of mine is, how do we take the incumbent workforce with us on the journey? You can only do that through formal structured training, and you have to do it early, because otherwise we'll just take longer than we should to actually realize practical gains in this area. AI could be transformative. I look at it in education as someone who ultimately runs an education organization. We've long had this 2 sigma problem in education. People who are one-to-one tutored perform 2 standard deviations better in learning outcomes than people who don't get one-to-one tutoring. AI now allows us to give everyone access to a one-to-one tutor, and you can do that in a way that doesn't require you to have hundreds of thousands of humans delivering that technology. So there's a really practical case of where AI provides scale that wouldn't exist before. And what we found in terms of the adoption of AI, so we have a very effective AI coach called Atlas. It's trained on the Socratic method, so it doesn't give people the answers. It responds with questions, and it actually tries to kind of tease out the process of education and then application in the workforce. The fastest adopters of our AI coaching have been the over 45s. And also, we've seen incredible adoption rates among those with additional learning needs, be it Asperger's, autism, dyslexia, who have often been left behind by the traditional education system. So the opportunity is massive just within an education field.
And speaking of opportunities, the UK has faced a productivity growth crisis for many years now. So how can enterprises and government organisations optimise their investments in AI to best address that particular challenge?
So this is all about how you turn potential, and the potential value is massive, into practical, tangible outcomes for both top line and bottom line for businesses and organizations. And training is a key part of the solution. One of the reasons I'm such an advocate of apprenticeships is it is learning on the job, it's structured with coaches, and it's all about outcomes and application. If you can make your learning programs consequential, i.e. if you can measure the impact they're having, they become immediately valuable. And so if you want to turn AI from this kind of theoretical concept or toy within organizations into something that actually changes the way people work on a daily basis, how they behave, and the kinds of things they can deliver, you need to invest in that training layer. And it cannot just be niche data teams, niche technology teams. It needs to be the broad workforce.
Can you talk a bit about the mistakes or the common mistakes that organisations are making when they're rolling out skills and training around AI? And what can you do to encourage people to be bolder in creating those frameworks for training?
So a common mistake is on saying, well, look, AI matters, so we have to be doing something about it, but not actually defining what are the goals. Do we want to make the organisation more efficient? Do we want new routes to revenue? Do we want to change the way our people are working? Because if you don't clarify the goals, then AI becomes a hammer looking for a nail, and it has that problem in a lot of organizations. I think the other challenge is that this is, as I mentioned before, this is not a niche pursuit. Take the work we're doing in the NHS. AI training is now relevant from everyone from clinicians to frontline administrators. And so you cannot overlook key parts of your workforce where you assume they work in a very particular way, this won't apply to them. It really can change everything, but you've got to be thoughtful and you've got to be very intentional about who you're training.
What would you say to those senior business decision makers that have become very hyper-focused around the idea that AI can be implemented to save costs, to cut jobs and so on? How do you persuade those people that there's much more to it than that?
Well, and by the way, that approach is really dangerous. If the upshot is that AI is just going to mean I can cut heads and automate things I couldn't automate before, not only are we missing a large part of the opportunity, but the social discourse around AI will turn very quickly. Governments will get involved, regulators will get involved, and we will squander the opportunity. So it is really important that companies focus on their incumbent workforce, how we make sure this doesn't lead to job obsolescence or replacement, but instead we train and upskill people so they're brought on this journey. You know, if I look at some of the work we're doing with local authorities, for example, in children's services, they're able to provide much better outcomes when they can add AI and data skills to their current job. And these are often people who've been doing the job for 20 or 30 years. They know how to deal with families. They know how to spot patterns and issues. But scaling that and doing it in a way that's kind of evidence-based and data-based rather than based on gut is really important and valuable. And companies love the idea of taking people with a really clear skill and specialism in a certain area and using AI to just make them even better, right? Use it to take that kind of superpower and expand it.
Yeah. As an example, can you talk a bit about the work that you've been doing with Fujitsu on that?
So we've been working with Fujitsu for a couple of years now, and the first piece was really embedding kind of wider data literacy, data analysis, data science skills across the workforce, because you can't actually use AI to do anything particularly useful unless you have fairly sound foundational data. We've now been working with them on how the organization becomes more AI native. It's a combination of upskilling people internally and bringing in new talent in order to go and deliver that. And we've particularly focused with Fujitsu on their public sector practice because it's an incredible area. They're delivering huge amounts of value to their customers in helping modernize their infrastructure. But when you combine the skills layer with the technology layer, it becomes an absolute force multiplier for, if you look at the public sector, everyone in the public sector is struggling with cost pressures, with desires for efficiency. and with the need to go and prove and evidence outcomes. Using AI properly allows you to completely break this kind of static formula that they've been struggling with for ages and deliver masses of value in a way that actually is hugely socially impactful and returns immediate benefits to the economy and the taxpayer.
That's a fascinating point to finish on, Euan. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.